Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 553.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because we are going to, well, I think today it would be safe to say we're going to explode your brain. Here's why. If you find yourself after listening today that you have to listen again to make sure you got it all, then yes, you heard correctly. If you find yourself today going, wow, how come no one has ever said this to me before? Well, that is also a correct response. If you find yourself at the end of today's episode going, man, that sounds like something I absolutely need to figure out more about and understand how I can make that a strategy for myself and my family and my business, that is also an appropriate response because all of those questions and more happened to me the first time I heard today's guest, because there are so many things that we don't know, we don't even know. And yes, you've heard it said, what you don't know can't hurt you. I beg to differ. Today, we are going to be talking to none other than Patrick Donohoe. He's the author of the best-selling book, Heads I Win, Tails You Lose. Yes, that was said correctly. And he's the founder and CEO of Paradigm Life. Now, if you are in the financial space at all, you probably already know him. And you tuned in because you're like, dude, I need to hear more from him, because that is exactly what happens to people when they get exposed to new concepts that sounds like, man, this could change my life. Dare I say, paradigm. Now, here's the thing. Today, we're going to have lots of fun. We're going to learn some things. But most importantly, I want to make sure that you were prepared to listen, love, and learn from Patrick Donohoe. Patrick, how you doing?
Jay, that was an amazing intro. One take. That was one take. That was awesome. I'm doing pretty good. I have mad respect for, but you've always been that way. You've always been such a good speaker, very eloquent, versed, and knowledgeable. So, but I'm stoked to be on with you. It's going to be an awesome conversation.
Yeah, I'm fired up too. When I saw your name, I was like, yes! Why haven't we done this before? That's literally the thought that went through my head. And I'm pretty excited that you're here because I was being very genuine. Well, the first time I heard you, I was like, huh? And wait, but no, someone should have said all those things to me before. And, just understanding that and knowing that you were there and you're, such a, I think, very approachable, great person, completely opposite to every financial planner or type that you typically see, which made it easy to ask you questions and do those things. Anyway, before I digress, we must ask you, even though this is like, it's still crazy to me, first time here, I must ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. So you could say Black Widow, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Superman, etc. You get the idea, because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. For example, as a entrepreneur, occasionally I can envision myself flying around town using our products and services to save our customers one sale at a time. Also, though, like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. If you think about Spider-Man, for example, there was a time he was just a kid going to school, doing his thing, paying attention to nobody, taking some photos. Then one day he gets bit by a spider, discovers that, man, I have a superhuman ability, and now he has to choose whether to use it for good or for evil. So my question to you is as follows. Before your book, before Paradigm Life, before being, voted by Investopedia as one of the nation's top 100 most influential financial advisors, before all of that and everything we know you for today, what we want to know is, who is Patrick Donohoe?
Holy cow. Well, thanks for the warning about that question. That's crazy. Jay, what comes to mind is I've always been driven to succeed, and I think that's given me a lot of things I've achieved in life, but it's also made me extremely unhappy.
Hmm.
And but I'd also say that I've as much as I have been driven, there's a hunger to understand, and the hunger I think is in part curiosity about the way things are, the way I am, and what I want, and knowing that whatever it is I say I want, or in my mind come up with, a feeling or an emotion or this, whatever the achievement, whatever the end result, I've always known I can have that.
Hmm.
And I don't know where it came from. I mean, it's nothing I did, intentionally. It may have been, the way I was raised with, very driven parents that happened to not really be around that much. So I was independent at an early age. My parents were, both teachers, but they, had master's degrees. They, really strived to achieve in their life. So it may have been that influence. I have no idea. Maybe it's the community I grew up in, but I would say if you were to boil it down, it was definitely a knowledge and a belief that what I wanted, I could have.
Now, that's interesting to me because there's a number of individuals who want many things, and there are times where we can want something for ourselves, but it takes time to become a person who believes that, yeah, okay, there's a saying that I like to say often: wealth is for everyone. That means me. The reason that saying is there, the reason that I believe T. Harv Eker is the one that I heard it from, says it, is because a lot of people don't have that fundamental belief that, hey, that thing over there, whatever it is that I want, that it was put there and I can have it too. Why did you get so lucky?
Like I said, I mean, everyone's set of circumstances that really creates their psychology is different, right? And the human experience is fascinating because we all have a different one. And the way in which we look at the world today is in large part how we've gone through and processed the thousands, millions of experiences that we've had in the past. But Jay, I have to believe that there is just one singular, well, a couple things that people really are after.
Hmm.
And one, I believe it's to really find themselves and to be happy and to figure out what it takes to be happy. And I think we link and anchor certain things, whether it's money or a career or a relationship or set of circumstances, something in the physical world, to create that degree of fulfillment and happiness. And that's where I've fallen short. And you look at a lot of wealthy people that achieve a lot today that end up killing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at just what wealth is today, and I think wealth is ultimately happiness and fulfillment. And you don't necessarily need a certain car or a business or an amount of money. It's an emotion that I think is available to all. At the same time, going into one of those, I would say, fundamental things I've learned in business and personally with my relationships with Cynthia and my kids and my family is the psychological aspect to it, which is what do people want? What do I want? And then as we're aligned, how can we give each other what we want? And that's just been what I've obsessed about for the last couple of years. And I wouldn't say that I have the equation to for everyone that's applicable. It's universal and applicable to everyone. But at the same time, I've met with and worked with thousands of people. My team has as well. And that's a conclusion I came to. It's not just, me looking at my life and my set of circumstances. It's also looking at the thousands of circumstances of others. I think people are after the same thing.
Yeah, fundamentally, we are definitely more similar than different. And I love how you're leading into the next area that I want to talk about, because many people want to know, and I think it's a great topic to unpack, is to find out what are those top 7 things that you've learned that formal education could have never taught you on the way to 7 figures.
Yeah, so I wrote them down. When you told me that, I was like, okay, 1, 2. I mean, I could probably come up with a lot, but what I love not thinking through something. I love just kind of riffing, right?
Sure.
Because you don't have to think about it. It's kind of what's part of you, which I think is interesting. But I would say, the first thing I wrote down is understanding that you are your best asset, and you have infinite potential. And I think people look at wealth outside of themselves, but you as your best asset, it's essentially ownership over your psychology, but it's also understanding that you have certain uniqueness to you that's unlike anybody else, and really discovering that and investing in it and magnifying it allows you to apply it to the marketplace and contribute to the world. And I think there's a magic behind that, where you are able to associate value you've provided to others to yourself. It's what you've done, and I think that's one of the greatest ways to be happy and fulfilled. But today, and I think it's being turned on its head. The school system, the workforce, in large part, has been created to train workers in military, like factory workers in the military. That's where the whole system came from. And we're not taught that we're our best asset. We're taught that you have to do X, Y, Z and check this box, this box, and this box, okay, in order to be successful. Okay. And it's all get A's, get a good job, have a 401k, get benefits, get a title, right? It's all outside of ourselves. And I look at, really understanding ourselves and looking at our uniqueness. You may get C, it's the Kiyosaki's book, why A students work for C students and B students work for the government, right? It's that idea that, just because you don't get A's doesn't mean you're not smart. And that's what hurt me, I would say, early on psychologically, is I felt less than something because I got C's, I got B's. It was hard for me to get A's, and mainly because of attention span and patience. But I look at, really what I've been able to discover about myself. I would have traded it in a heartbeat for any value I got from, getting an A in biology, So it's one of those, like, I look at myself as my best asset. So taking care of my body, taking care of my psychology, doing the things that are fulfilling to me, showing up in my relationships, being able to hone in on my skills and how they apply to the business world and the team that I have professionally. There's never-ending possibility associated with refining who you are and the value you can provide to the marketplace. And you're going to make way more money, establish way more wealth than any other thing outside of you, if that's what your focus is. And that's at least of what I've seen, not just in myself, but in others.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'm liking this focus that you've put on not just taking care of yourself physically, but you've mentioned it now, I believe 3 or 4 times, about looking after your own psychology as well, and understanding that it doesn't just happen. It's something that you must put some effort towards. So I'm curious to know, what else have you learned on this path that formal education hasn't taught you?
So the next thing I put down is leadership versus management, right? Going back to, the structure of our school system and the hierarchical way that we're, like, socially programmed, it carries to the workplace. And nobody likes to be managed. Nobody likes to be told what to do. Everybody loves to be led. And I look at, leadership and management is often, interchanged. And I don't think it should be, because leadership is it's been, for me, Jay, it's been one of the hardest things and I'm still working at it. It's one of the hardest things to do, which is lead a team, lead a group, being looked to as the leader. For so many years, Like I wanted people to take ownership of their own life and not rely on me. And that's why what I associated leadership to, and it was wrong. And it's allowed me to learn some very valuable lessons, which came as a result of a lot of pain. But today I look at one of the most fulfilling things that I do, which is still difficult for me, is to show up as a leader in my business, a leader in my family, and a leader in my community. And not to say that I'm this like appointed person in my community, I don't mean that. I say understanding the principles of leadership has really, I don't know, it's blessed me, and it's made me incredibly happy. And I don't know, management these days, everybody hates a manager, and people associate management with leadership. And I don't think it's the same. And I think if you really study what leadership is, everybody has within them the ability to lead. And honing in on that is one of the, I would say, going back to use your best asset, it's one of those skills and characteristics that if you adopt, it's powerful, not just in what you can achieve, but also what you can feel and how fulfilled you are in your ability to make a difference in the lives of others.
So, in some of the things that you just said, you mentioned that there was pain involved. I'm curious to hear, how has your relationship to the concept of fear, pain, and or mistakes evolved during this process?
That's a great question. Yeah, I look at gosh, I can't remember who the poet is or the author, but it essentially, paraphrasing, it says that the deeper pain, sadness, the deeper that emotional level gets, the more significant the other side of the spectrum is. So you kind of think of it as roots in a tree. The deeper the roots go, the higher the tree can stand. And so I look at pain, sadness, disappointment, the lack of fulfillment, and my ability to emotionally experience that as an incredible gift. And most people shy away from that. And I look at it as an incredible gift because of, context. I really have seen where I've experienced certain things at a very deep level, which has allowed me to experience even greater positive things. Does that make sense?
To me, 100%. I mean, there's so many times of it that I know first starting out, I had the impression all I want to do is win, and that'll be great. But yet there's so much more about who I am today and what I'm able to do and how to be a support to others, and the things that actually bring fulfillment that come from the times when I was learning to reassociate myself to fear, pain, mistakes, loss, etc. So I get you 100%, because it's like you don't know light if you don't know dark. Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey, and what I want to say to you is that the number one mistake that I have ever made in business, number one, has been waiting too long to do the books, waiting too long to get the bookkeepers, the accountants, the CPAs, the CFOs involved, and I don't want you to make that same mistake. That mistake cost me over 6 figures, and now for a significant discount, you have the ability to get your books together using FreshBooks. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary. Again, that's gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary. FreshBooks is the easy to use software designed to help you, the small business owner, the freelancer, get organized and save time on invoicing, getting paid faster, keeping those books in order so that it becomes a bonus for you to do your taxes as opposed to a burden. Go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflow diary and get started today. And now let's get back to the rest of the story.
No, and it's one of the things that I look at in people, and their tendency to avoid fear, avoid pain, avoid disappointment it's one of those, you miss so much opportunity, you miss so much experience. Now, you're not going to go out and blatantly fail or blatantly approach fear. But it's one of those things where looking at where it fits into the experience of life, it's where all the great lessons come from. And I think life is designed that way. And, I don't know, I look at my kids, Cynthia, she grew up in like the hood in Mexico, right? And she didn't have anything. Like the concrete floor her entire life. They never had, heat or air conditioning. And it was like 100, it's like 100 billion degrees there in the summertime. And, she grew up with an experience of life that I didn't have. And how we have raised our kids, right? I would say we've made some errors because she wanted to give them everything she didn't have. And that hurts kids more than it helps, even though I understand the intention. And I look at, our kids and being able to put them in certain, environments where there is, an experience of pain and disappointment and having to work. And it's benefited them and provided different perspective on, how they show up as friends and how they show up as leaders, in school or in our neighborhood. Right. So I don't know. I just think that the more experience you can have and the more spectrum that exists between the negative or what would be construed as negative and the positive, the deeper meaning life is going to have for you.
Well said. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at the list that you wrote down. We're only going to talk about one more. And I want it to be the one that if your kids heard it, that would be the one that would make the biggest difference ever for them. What is that lesson? What is that lesson that school, that formal education is never going to teach them, but that they need to know on their path?
Oh, it's easy, and you'll totally get it right when I say it. It's understanding the nature of a team and understanding what teams and groups of people can do together. And this is powerful, right? Because in school it's very individualistic, right? With teams and in school, like the assumption is that you should have all skills, right? And you should test well in all skills, and it's just not reasonable because that's not how people are wired.
Nope.
Right? I think people are given natural abilities, natural gifts, and blessings to that they're good at that other people aren't. Right. And it's meant to complement. And that's what I discovered, especially as, my discovery, my journey as a person, as a leader, is I know what I'm good at. I know what my tendencies are. I know how I show up. I know what fulfills me. And I realize what doesn't. And so there's something I love talking about, Jay, which is, we know what financial statements are. It's, this objective scorecard to what value we've created in the world, which, money is a byproduct of value. You look at the mirror to that, and I consider the mirror what's called the human life value statement, where it measures where those financial resources come from, right? Income, income just doesn't come out of nowhere, right? There has to be value created.
Hold on, say that part again. Say that part again, because there's a lot of people, not just your children, who need to hear that part, because I know that to be true.
Is it the statement of income?
Income, income, value. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't just like you show up and it appears, right? It's like there's value that has to precede income, and that value comes from you. And so I look at what's more valuable, the source of the money or the money itself. And so the source of the money is what I consider a human life value asset, right? And it could be training, experience, certification. But I think the more you can focus on really what you're good at, whether it's leadership or you think through problems, and it could be you have a good instinct to make quick decisions. That could be a characteristic. Anyway, so I would say really understanding where your assets are also allows you to establish your liabilities. And this is where it goes to, I would say, a conflict with typical financial planning, right? Where it's, you get out of debt and you establish assets and you grow those assets over the long term, right? And one day you'll have enough, right? But I look at, the avoidance of debt, and I think debt is often mischaracterized. And I look at debt from a human life value standpoint. It's the things you're not good at that you pay others to do for you in order for you to focus on what you are good at. And that's where I've had to have very painful interactions and conversations over the years because I didn't hire well. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't
Oh
know the
man.
questions to ask, and I just made gut assumptions, and I was wrong a lot. And so I would say the thing I've learned is to really identify, number one, good culture, good principles, and good values based on certain questions that I asked during interview processes, and also getting into the different tests that exist, whether it's Colby or Myers Briggs or the Culture Index, which is a newer one. These are ways in which I objectively look at where these people's strengths are, where they're do they complement my assets? And it's been amazing. And so it's not just the nature of teams and working in teams, but it's working in teams strategically where you show up in your strengths and you have a team around you that has a similar set of values and principles, but show up in their strengths, which happen to be your weaknesses. And not weaknesses, I would say non-strengths. Let's call them non-strengths, not weaknesses. That
Yeah,
makes
no,
sense?
yeah, well, it makes perfect sense to me. And then man, yes, so much so when you're talking. Are you familiar with the Wealth Dynamics by Roger Hamilton?
I not as much. I know the name. I've heard of it before. I've not looked into it though.
No, it's just one of my favorite tools when I'm trying to build the team because it's literally how it's focused so that we don't have too much overlap between individuals, etc., and understanding what role everyone needs to play. Because I have too I've played out of position. I've had people playing out of position, and and I'm curious because I'll tell you mine in a minute. But I want to know what is one of your most favorite questions now to ask in an interview?
Oh, so if you're in any type of leadership or management position, there's a book and a kind of a theory called top grading. Have you ever heard of that before?
No, I'm
Oh,
listening.
dude, it's amazing. Like top grading is a way in which you get to know a person based on the questions you ask. And so a few of the fundamental ones is, tell me about the most difficult challenge you faced before you left home.
Okay. Wow.
And what it does. So it's not like a question of, what would your boss say about you if I were to ask him what your experience was like in your last job? It's not crap like that because people are prepared to answer those questions and they're not going to tell you the actual truth. Because people show up and they, have a fear of looking bad. Anyway, I don't want to get into the psychology there, but top grading, what it does, it strategically asks people about their experience of life, not just, from it before they left home, but as they, experienced college, as they experienced their first job, their first position. Like it helps extract really who the person is, their values, their principles, the lessons that they've learned. And that really, it's been instrumental in the hiring we've done over the last couple of years. And so top grading, there's I believe a podcast now too, but I know
Hmm.
it's a book, it's audio book, and there's a software associated with it, dude. It's powerful. So we have all applicants before they even apply take the Wonderlic test, and the Wonderlic is what the NFL Combine uses to test cognitive ability as well as how they work in teams and groups, like culture. And then once they go through that, then we typically use Colby, but that's right before we hire. But top grading is the interview theory that we use, which has been amazing. And so and you can use it in the investment world, right? Because I look at investment, and all investment is business, and all business is people. And
Hmm.
and and people all have fundamental ways in which they behave. And I look at investments, and I see very few bad investment ideas. I've seen those too. I've seen great investment ideas, but I've seen most investments fail, and it's not because of the idea. It's the ability to execute the idea. Okay, it's take the idea and go from theory into reality, and that requires teamwork. And here's the thing, and you know this just as well as I do, Jay. It's like things don't always happen the way that we hope for. And when you do have those curveballs, it could be within your control. It could be, the government legislative risk that changes the taxation of this, that, or the other. It could be it could be a market. It could be, some black swan thing. Right? There's all sorts of events that can happen. But in the moment that it happens, most people instinctively react, and those reactions are animalistic. They're from the caveman days when, our nature was to survive, right? And that's still within us. Most people show up like that when they are attacked. But those that work in teams that have good culture, they look at those events as huge opportunities and are able to logically process very emotionally high situations and make the right decision. And that typically doesn't happen with investment, right?
Yeah.
And there's all, you can go to enterprise levels, right? With all the crap that happened with Wells Fargo or GE or Johnson & Johnson. I mean, there's like, this isn't just like a small business, small, time thing. It's a big enterprise level thing as well. So I look at being able to understand, top grading, understand how to ask good questions allows you to analyze the team behind the idea, the team behind the investment, as opposed to just looking at a pro forma and saying, yeah, it looks pretty good, or the prospectus and saying, oh, those guys look like pretty good guys. I think I'll invest some money there, which is typically how people invest these days.
I'd spend more and more and more time focused on who than the what all day long, because that's just where I too have seen the errors either in my judgment or the team's judgment, especially if I'm making an investment of any particular kind. Which by the way, it sounds strange now to say that one of the questions that I like, while not necessarily, I don't know if it follows what you're talking about, but I like what you're talking about, is I like to ask people, just, tell me about the last 5 books that you've read. Because how they answer that one, if they can answer that one, it tells me a lot about who that person is. And then again, I don't care if it's comic books. I don't care what it is. I just want to know, like, what are the last 5 books? Because there's information there that'll tell me about you.
And I would love to know after that what they applied and the difference that it made.
Depending on the books that sometimes depending on the books that they say, I will ask them that, because sometimes it's, it could just be a romance novel for entertainment. It's like, oh well, okay.
Hey dude, there's always principles in romance novels, and I think you get the most important principles.
Okay.
Well, we won't go on that. We won't go down that route.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just, but yes, that has become one of my favorite things to find out, because I too have learned, painfully so, that it's the person behind that's going to help the company achieve its objectives. And
have you ever read anything by Alison Armstrong?
No. I'm writing it down though.
This will rock your world.
Okay.
So I read this a while back. And, I'm not sure your family dynamic, Jay, but I grew up with all brothers and I played hockey, and I never had a girlfriend until, I kind of had not really a serious girlfriend, but Cynthia was pretty much like my first serious relationship. And we've been married for 16 years now.
Wow.
I never understood women. And this is bad. You can edit this if you want. But I've come to appreciate women in the business world, in the investment world, because when women and men work together, it's incredible what happens. Absolutely incredible. If you have a male-dominated investment, that actually is a red flag for me now. And I look at the difference it's made in my company, the difference I've seen it make, in just my relationships, not with Cynthia, but with my mom and with other women. It's just, I think men naturally do not understand the perspective of women. And so that, Alison Armstrong has an incredible series where she really opened me up to, again, an additional layer and dynamic to team building and teamwork. And it's magical, dude. It's absolutely amazing.
It's funny that you say that, because while, again, I hadn't heard of Alison until this particular moment, this is what I've consistently done. I will make sure it is a mandatory thing. Like, there's a project that I want to work on right now, and until I can find a female who is specifically versed in rehab construction and dealing with some cities and permits, I have been unwilling to move forward, because I'm like, no, I need that perspective in order to execute this vision. properly. And with even with the current team, I've just like, you know what, I have to include a female perspective. It has always gone better, period. And I've never been able to explain why, and I honestly don't care why anymore. I just know it goes better.
Reading this, it helps marriage. It helps. It just helps you understand what you're about and understand what, how women perceive you and how you perceive women. I have two of my business coaches now are women, and it's just an amazing dynamic. And I do it all virtually. But it's one of those things where it's just provided me such a different perspective of who I am, how I show up, how I lead. But yeah, it occurred to me a couple years ago when I had another business coach who, she ran the entire development team at T-Mobile. She was a VP at Expedia. I mean, very accomplished woman. And she came into my office for the first time and she said, "You know what? I can give you, with one change, you can grow by 20-30% in a year." I'm like, "What?" Like, okay, well, what? She said, "You need about 25% more women." And this isn't a sexist.
Awesome.
It's not a sexist thing. I mean, if you read those books,
Yeah, no,
right, what it does, it just shows healthy culture and a healthy balance of humanity. And men are not meant to be alone with men. Women are not meant to be alone with women. And there's this, magical dynamic when it comes to that integration that, I mean, I can't explain it. I can't explain it either. I understand it more now, but it's been incredible, man. I mean, I
agree.
I can't say enough about it. And I may sound like some chauvinistic, a-hole right now, but that's not my intention. My intention is, that was one of the big failures I've had in business, is not understanding other people and how they work together. And I've looked at, the amount of work that I put into all of that. I'm not even scratching the surface, but the work I have done and what I've implemented has made a massive difference.
And at this point, we must begin to share with people, what it is that you do, because I know they're listening this far and going, wow, this Patrick dude is interesting. And Jay clearly likes him. And what was it that that Patrick said? And what was Patrick talking about that first time Jay met him that had him so confused? Because at this point they go, okay, Patrick's cool. I understand him. He's great. I want to know more. So now share with us, if you will, some of the thoughts, the concepts, especially either some of the ideas behind your book or the concepts that you and I were discussing when we first met.
Well, there's huge similarity to everything we've talked about.
I know. That's why I'm excited. I'm like literally bouncing in my chair right now. You couldn't see it, but I am.
Well, so I am, I've been in the financial services industry for 15 years now. And I look at the world very, very differently. I always have. And my original mentor was Robert Kiyosaki's first financial advisor, and I still work with her today. We do some training together, and she opened me up to this world that is, part of the financial services industry, but it's not the dominating part. And it changed my reference in how people are taught and conditioned to manage their finances. And just as much as we've talked about leadership and management, as well as working as an individual instead of in teams, right? Our society has been programmed from, what a successful career means. It's been programmed to, what success in school means. And I think it's very unprincipled, and we've hit on all of those things. It carries right to financial services. I believe retirement is the worst word that has ever been created for society, and specifically America. If you think of people and wanting to retire, it's anti-life. Okay? We're not meant to not grow and contribute. We're not wired that way. But yet retirement is this idea of working, slaving away, deferring money to some future day and then not doing anything after that that's contributing to society. It kills people. And it kills the world, because the world needs these minds at the age of 50, 55, 60. These are like prime years where your brain has had so much experience. Okay. You've brought value to the marketplace, and now you're just going to hang it up and looking at really what people are after, I don't believe is retirement. People are after freedom. They're after independence. And so we have a financial advisory, and we talk about really establishing your finances to live a fulfilling life, not to retire. And I'll talk, the book I wrote talks extensively about all the different strategies, but fundamentally, I would say that there's kind of three steps to ultimately achieving financial independence. The first one is establishing what we call a foundation of certainty. And this foundation is going to be different for everyone, but it comes from asking yourself the question, like, what would you need in a liquid account right now to stop working and know that by the time that money ran out, you could figure out what to do that is fulfilling, that is gratifying, that aligns with, who you are, your skills, your abilities, your experience. The second is, educate yourself about the investments you're making and focus in on one, maybe two asset classes, but become an expert and understand, not that you're going to use that as your business, but understand what it is, how to ask good questions. And I put in there, and this is before you asked me about the seven those 7 points, but understand human psychology and organizational psychology. So I would say good books to understand that is Double Double by Cameron Herold, Traction by Gino Wickman, and Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. These are just full of information to understand group and organizational psychology. Powerful books. And then the third is to essentially invest in yourself first as your best asset in order to find a fulfilling career and calling that you can do for the rest of your life. Now, it doesn't mean that you're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week for the rest of your life. No, it's establishing a fulfilling lifestyle, okay, which includes travel, includes doing fun things, doing things on your terms, but having that as the end as opposed to having not doing anything as an end. And there are far too many people in the camp of hanging up their boots, hanging up their lab coats, hanging it all up at the age of 60, 65. And I just don't think that is healthy for America. And it's really created a huge mess. I mean, the Medicare, issues right now and the Social Security issues. And it's incredible how naive people are to the changes that have been made to Social Security from a taxation standpoint that people are just oblivious to. And they're just going to continue to do it because fundamentally it's unprincipled and never should have been suggested in the first place, because it was essentially a Prussian solution to getting old people out of the workforce so new people can go in. And that seed was planted during the Great Depression and has just been like growing as a weed. And you kill it off, it just grows back as a weed. It's this weed that is like sucked so much potential out of the human mind, the American mind. And that's where the subtitle of the book is a financial strategy to reignite the American dream. And in that book, I define what the American dream is, which is different than how most people define it. But anyway, I could go on and on this, but looking at everything that we talked about previous, Jay, I mean, they're the same exact principles, right? People are looking for a fulfilling life. They're looking to be happy. They're looking to be to establish experience, which is not a finite game. It's an infinite game. And the sooner you can realize that, the sooner you can, start to reposition your assets, reposition your goals, reposition your career, right? In order to, achieve what everybody is after. And they're thinking retirement can give it to them, and it won't.
Right. I mean, I don't know if you know this about me, but it's probably near the time we met. But I know about 6 years ago, I called myself retired, and you should not do that at 38, I promise, if ever. And but I learned exactly what you're just saying. It's like, man, I have to contribute. I now know that about myself. I had to do that to learn that no, doing nothing is not an option for me. I don't know what I'm going to do all the time, but I got to do something and I've got to contribute. And I am more alive because of it, literally. So it definitely is one of those things. Now, you also mentioned a financial concept that absolutely redefined my understanding of insurance. Could you share with the people a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that first step, right? What we consider that, fundamental pillar is a foundation of certainty. And that foundation is, we use a specifically designed insurance policy to establish that foundation. And in and of themselves, tools will never create freedom. They'll never create financial independence. They're just tools. We use this tool to establish the mindset of certainty, which is, I would say, necessary in order to achieve independence. And I say that because we all have this drive for certainty, right? We want to make sure things are a certain way, and it's different for everyone. But at the same time, we want to make sure things are calculated and assumed, and we can feel confident in. But also, we need uncertainty, right? Because if everything was the exact same all the time, life would suck. It would be boring, right? And we need that degree of uncertainty. And there's a saying by Tony Robbins, which is the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty that you can comfortably live with. But establishing certainty allows you now to value uncertainty and actually have influence over it. But most people don't have influence over it, and they don't control it. They don't even really know it exists. But that's why they take extreme measures with their investments and their allocations and how they manage their finances. And ultimately, without the foundation, it ends up crumbling. And I've seen it a lot of times. So we established essentially an insurance policy that's one of the most certain vehicles that's out there that gives multiple characteristics, whereas most financial vehicles only provide one. So the characteristic is, you have essentially tax-free growth, you have asset protection, it comes with a line of credit, you have liquidity without any penalty, and you also have death benefit associated with it. And you have this idea of systematic saving. So it's a built-in, I would say, discipline associated with putting certain money aside every time you make it. So all those characteristics establish this foundation. And once that foundation is secured, now you go to the next level, which is establishing your investments. And then as you establish your investments, it doesn't start with a thing. It starts with your education, investing in yourself. And then finally going to, establishing your calling and your career that aligns with who you are, that you can do for the rest of your life.
Now, if you are anything like me, what you just heard from him is still like, huh? And I know, and that's great, because I told you that was going to happen. So Patrick, for those that have listened this far, what's going to be the best way for them to catch up with you, find out more, unpack these many layers of this onion that you're leaving with us today?
Yeah, so the book, it's why I wrote the book, right? Because the philosophy is different. It's different than how we've been societally programmed, and whenever something's different, there's a semblance of fear and skepticism. So that's why I wrote the book, and in there exists the philosophy, the underlying philosophy, and a lot of things will resonate with what we've talked about today. But then it gets into the actual strategies themselves, and goes through why we consider them to be of such high quality and such a high degree of certainty. And then we get into actual investment strategy that talks, through real estate, it talks through other types of investments, it talks about how to invest in yourself, how you can identify certain things. So it basically gives you a playbook on how to implement what we call the perpetual wealth strategy, which is the actual strategy that we teach clients. Now, if you like the book, there's links in there where you can access a study guide that's free. And in that study guide are different tutorials that unpack even more details about the actual strategies that we use.
And where can I go to get a copy of that?
It's headsortailsiwin.com.
I love it. So as we wind down here, I've got a final question for you, because here's what I know is that there's a number of individuals. They started out in one place as they were listening to us. They've listened this far and they're like, this is interesting. And many of them have made a decision about, hey, this is the next thing that I'm going to do, and they're at what I like to call the precipice of decision. And oftentimes when they're there, or when we're there as a human being, we're looking over the edge. And as you know, there's a companion, and that companion comes in the form of a voice. And it's a voice that reminds us of, well, it says things like, you're going to do what? You're going to invest in who? And what are you talking about all this stuff? Why don't you just go back to work? You're not going to start a business. You're not going to have investments. That's not for you. And for some people, they're related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that this time it's going to be different. This time they're going to follow through. They're going to do exactly what you suggest, Patrick. And they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
I understand and empathize with how difficult it is to accept or even explore a new idea. And I would assume that the majority of people are not going to do anything. I mean, that's just the statistics. Now, I would say maybe higher because they're, actually doing something different by listening to your podcast, right? But at the same time, most people have way too much information in their mind, and they have to get rid of something in order to replace it with something else. Okay, you can't fit anything else. There's, we have way more information, coming at us in a day than most people 100 years ago didn't experience in 5 lifetimes. Right. So so I get it. Okay. And that's where I start with the psychology of things is, you can go down the route that most people are going down and look at, just the results that people are experiencing. They're not healthy, they're not happy, and they're unfulfilled. And that path is known. And I think sometimes people, even though it's painful, will take the path that's known rather than explore the path that's unknown. But looking at the experience I've had, if you really explore these options, it is for everybody. All human beings are after the same thing, as I mentioned in the beginning. And the path that leads to a fulfilling life, there's examples everywhere if you know where to look. But that perspective, that paradigm is not, it's not something most people have because of how programmed we've been by the workplace and by our school system. So looking at taking that next step and living a fulfilling life, Jay, I mean, I know you have as well. It's like I know thousands of people that have been able to open their mind to doing things different, and it's made all the difference. And it's allowed them to understand more about themselves, understand what's possible for them, and really achieve a life worth living. And that's, we have one experience as far as we know. And in order to, really capitalize on the time that we have, it's doing the things that we love with the people that we love. And that's what it comes down to. And that is, in order to achieve that, there's a formula. And that formula is not what the majority of people are following today. They're following a path to servitude, ultimately.
Wow. And I think everyone can see why that, you and I, we can talk for a very long time, and I can continually learn and grow from everything that you're doing. And it makes it just exciting. You're a great person in general, just to be around it. I just want to be one of the first to say just thanks for taking the time to share your knowledge, your insight, and your wisdom here with us today at the Cashflow Diary, sir.
It's been an amazing hour, and I was really blessed to spend it with you, Jay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what times it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? Well, that means go grab a copy of the book, Heads I Win, Tails You Lose. Why? Because you want to understand what that statement means. More importantly, you want to be the one flipping that coin and putting the odds in your favor. Because if you think about some of the things that you've learned today, well, you know this. You know that the path to unfulfillment, well, that one's already known. So maybe it's time to choose the red or blue pill. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.